So, I want to talk a little bit about a crisis that's going on in Mexico. Recently, this year, 4 journalists have been killed in Mexico. Mexico is consistently rated one of the most dangerous places to do journalism. The journalists that are targeted are typically covering the government or corruption. And the reason I'm covering this now is because the woman who was most recently murdered outside her home was had actually asked the president of Mexico for protection. She had gone to a press conference that he was holding and had asked, "Hey, my life is in danger. Can you protect me?" And that protection had actually been given, but the security detail that she had received wasn't actually around when she was killed. And, this is really problematic because the press does a really important job. Now, they don't always do that job and they don't always do that job well, but in theory, we really need to protect the press because the press is essentially the only outlet that we as citizens of countries have to get information about our governments and to challenge our governments in non-election years, right? One of the things about democracy that can be frustrating is that, people get in and their terms are X amount of years, right? And oftentimes if someone makes a bad decision or does something that's shitty, it feels like there's a lot of time between shitty thing and your ability to vote them out. And by the way, oftentimes because we're so busy, electorates, as in groups of people who vote other people into office, don't have a particularly long memory. And part of that is by design. Part of it's because the news cycle moves so quickly. A part of it is because we're just all so busy with the rat race of life. But the press is supposed to be there in the stead of the people and challenge the politicians. I mean, their whole job is to, first of all, is to inform, right? The press should inform and educate the the masses. But the secondary function, and perhaps the main function of the press, is to challenge those in power. I think the old saying is, afflict the comfortable and comfort the afflicted. And truthfully, that is what the press is supposed to do, and it's why the press is so important. Now, you know, I've talked about the issues with corporate media and the mainstream media in the United States before, and I still hold those values to be important. But that doesn't mean that we shouldn't have a press. The solution to that is for there to be better press, for there to be press that is not tied to corporations, to press that has incentives to challenge power and should get their ratings and should get their goodies from challenging power as opposed to kowtowing to power, right? Every time the government does something bad, um, someone should be questioning it. If it's bad from a right wing perspective, then the right wing should be questioning the government's bad. From a left wing perspective, the left wing media be should be challenging the government. If it just kind of seems like a bad thing overall, then most media should be covering it. And that flow of information and that challenge allows us as citizens to help hold our politicians accountable, not because it's something that we're really going to be able to take advantage of when we actually go back to the polls, but media scandals that get big enough news get people talking. Sometimes it can lead to resignations. I mean, occasionally the press can actually lead to direct action on something. And by the way, the opposite is true too, right? If the press is not looking at anything, it's very difficult for there to be accountability. The Flint water crisis is actually a really great example where there was very little media coverage of it for most of the crisis. By the way, the crisis is still ongoing. Please go subscribe to Status Quo by Jordan Chariton if you want more information on the Flint water crisis. He has been covering it religiously. He does a great job. He's talked to lots of people, and he's uncovered all sorts of nonsense having to do with the Flint water crisis. But if the media doesn't cover an issue, then you're not likely to hear about that issue. But if the media does cover an issue, then you are very much likely to know things about it. And by the way, sometimes the populace does have a long memory, right? And you can actually hold someone accountable for one particular bad thing that they did. But even if you don't hold them accountable, right? If in an electoral sense, you can hold them accountable by protesting, or you can write them a letter or an email or what have you. You can it the press, the media allows the populace to have enough information to be engaged in democracy. And essentially, if you don't have a media, or if you have a media who is controlled or has bad incentives, you run out the ability for the citizenry to meaningfully interact with their politicians between electoral cycles. And although it's difficult to organize people to do things, there are lots of organizations out there that that care about causes that are constantly looking for this information. But they can't always have this information either. So the press also helps these advocacy organizations manifest their will and allow their subscribers or email list recipients or whatever it's going to be take the actions that they need to do. The media can increase and decrease the salience of particular issues. So I started this segment talking about Mexico. And the reason is because, and the reason is, as I stated earlier, is just because it's so dangerous for journalists, and there doesn't seem to be any justice being gotten for those journalists when they're killed. And essentially, what that does is it disincentivizes good journalism, and it incentivizes people to look the other way when there is corruption or where there's bribery or where there's something controversial, because they're afraid that someone will come after them, and there will not be any justice done, even if they are, even if the person is hurt or killed in the process of all of this. So we need to protect the press. I think Mexico offers us a dangerous window into what happens when you don't protect the press, when the media is essentially, killed without any justice, right? You start to see there are probably fewer and fewer of, I imagine there's probably fewer people who are trying to cover this beat now, this news beat, because it's just too dangerous. And by the way, I want to end this with one super, super sad story. And I don't have the picture of it, but the woman who was just killed, her dog is still waiting for her to come back. Her dog hasn't left the gravesite. It's really sad, guys. So if you don't care about this story because you don't care about press freedom, do it for all the dogs of all the journalists out there. It's a terrible reason, but seriously, guys, we need the press. We need to protect the press in this country and in all countries. And I hope that no matter what side of the ideological spectrum you fall under, you recognize and value the contribution that the press makes. Because if not, we don't really have any way to be active participants in our government, regardless of what government type that is.
Thanks for watching this video, guys. If you liked it, throw a like on it, share with your friends, and subscribe for more of our content. You can also find all of our videos and clips on youtube.com. Just search Let Them Eat Bread and you'll find all of our content. Alright guys, see you next time. Bye for now.